One of my favorite, and I think even Reverend Galen's favorite writers, and we've been blessed to hear Richard Rohr when we've been south. It was Washington, D.C. when we last heard Richard. Richard is a Roman Catholic spiritualist writer out of Arizona, and he's one of the most progressive speakers, writers, human beings that I know. And I subscribe every day to his reflections, and it never even dawned on me that his email that I get every day is called Action and Contemplation. And I think the reason why it never really dawned on me is I'm just all full of action as an extrovert. Action, action. And this week I read what he sent. He said, the most important word in our center's name is not action, nor is it contemplation. It's the word and. We need both compassionate action and we need contemplative practice for the spiritual journey. Without action, our spirituality becomes lifeless and bears no authentic fruit. Without contemplation, all our doing can come from ego. Even if it looks selfless, it can actually cause more harm than good. External behavior must be connected to and supported by spiritual guidance. It doesn't really matter which comes first. Action may lead you to contemplation. Contemplation may lead you to action. They need each other. So, I saw the movie 1917. Came out Thursday night. And I'm not going to say much more than this, but if you can close and squint your eyes at some of the gruesome parts of war, it is worth experiencing what soldiers around the world have had to endure, but these particular soldiers in Britain, in France at the time. Sam Mendes, the director, captures 7 hours of a journey of 2 young men. And in one sense, it's all about action. You've got 7 hours to get this done, and if you don't get it done, 1,600 will die or more. That's kind of the storyline. One of the reasons I'm so moved by this movie is not only are you following in the trenches with these young kids that aren't even 20, but there's a moment, and I'm certainly not going to reveal, but there's a part in the movie, there's so many parts, but one in particular, where all of a sudden you realize the power, and I'm speaking for myself personally as an action person, the power of contemplation. The world's been grieving, whether it's vigils in City Hall at Guelph, or it's in Ottawa, or it's in Tehran, or it's in the Ukraine, or Sweden, or Germany, wherever around the world, it's Australia. The world is deeply hurting. And at times like this, we can feel extremely alone, confused, powerless, and longing for truth, and longing for justice. And I think we are all impressed that our Prime Minister himself is expressing quite forcefully and honestly that a government in Iran needs to come forward honestly that they are now admitting to the shooting down of a civilian airline, erasing the lives of some of the most incredible people around the world. And each and every one of us who have ever flown, ever traveled, has to at some level feel a significant amount of grief that it could have been me. And also significant, as the paper revealed today, grief has turned to anger, and rightly so. And anger is an important feeling to express. We try to suppress anger at times, and we can do it. Then it rises up from time to time. I remember I was having a real go with an individual that we were just not understanding each other. He was out to what he would call save a historic church, and I was out to try to, I thought, bring balance to the perspectives of ministry. And in his greatest anger, he looked at me, and because I said to him, "What is this about for you?" In his greatest anger, he said, "It's about the best acoustic church in Ontario, the best organ. It's about this for me." And you know what? In his anger, I was very appreciative to understand what really mattered to him. He really cared deeply about that sanctuary and that organ. Anger is something that we need to express. But there is a problem, though, when anger is a place that we get stuck in. When we get stuck in it, and anybody who understands grief and has experienced it, we know that's an easy thing to happen. I'm thinking about Jesus and John the Baptist here, because John the Baptist, to me, one of the things I love about John is he's wild and woolly. He just says it like it is, and there's something quite refreshing about that. Like I said, as a minister of 30 plus years, I don't always like what somebody says to me, but I'll take it any time for somebody to just let me have it. And that's John the Baptist for me. I think Jesus is, with great humility, reminding John that he's human. He's come as God, but he came from God, but to be human. So, John, you need to baptize me. I want to experience everything that you experience. And rightly so, Jesus finally, when you get into the temple and he gets pretty upset with what's happening in the temple, he lets his anger really fly in that classic story of turning the tables over. And it's one of the stories I celebrate in Jesus because he gets angry. He's human, and the emotions fly. But there's still time for contemplation, because contemplation helps us to ask the question, why are we so angry? What is the wound that we are feeling? What is the pain? And then a big question in that is, how do we get through it? How do we find some healing and some forgiveness? My friends, in the United Church, in the Protestant Church, we have two sacraments. We have communion, the Eucharist, bread and wine, and we have water of baptism. And these are known as symbols of God to remind us that, it's not John Benham that makes things better or heals all things by any means. It's God. And actually, when I see the vigils around the world happening, and I know Galen and I have spoken about this often, the symbolic power of lighting a candle, realize that there's something quite healing happening and transformative for the world. That people are saying, enough. Enough of militarism, enough of racism, no more consumerism, an end to patriarchy, an end to individualism, and an end to everything being genderized as well. That people are longing for peace. One of the most meaningful stories I have, and I've told you before, but I'll tell you today, coming back from Israel several years ago, I was so confused with the voices of the Palestinians and the Arabs and the voices of the Jews, Israelites, as to what to make of all of it. And by chance, on a plane ride home at 4 a.m, sitting next to a stranger who happened to live in Detroit, I happened to be Jewish, visiting his mom and dad. We were about the same age, a businessman. And we got talking. And I just finally had to ask him, how in the world do you ever make any sense? And how do you find any kind of healing? And he looked at me and he said, well, I'm almost 60 years of age. And when I was a young boy, I would have told you I would never speak to a German. I would never go to Germany. I would never forgive those people for the Holocaust. And he said, here I am as a strong member of the Rotary Club. And I'll tell you something. Healing has come for me because I've now gone to Germany. And year by year, as a Rotarian, I go back and I meet German soldiers who followed their orders. And I have discovered that it takes an awful long time for people to find healing and forgiveness. So I want to conclude with this. I got a little gift was given to me yesterday on a rainy day. You know, I had lots of chores I could do around the house, and lo and behold, I was given a book. It was a Christmas book from my daughter. And as a high school teacher at times, she feels she finds life pretty challenging at times as a teacher. She loves being a teacher, but it's challenging, but she loves her students. And, you know, as a gift from your daughter at Christmas, it's good to read it. And she knows me very well because the book was called Beyond the Trees by Adam Schultz. And I hope to meet Adam one day. I know he's done a fair bit of work in the Indigenous PhD work through McMaster, and he's written the book called Against the North and the History of Canada in 10 Maps. I hope he comes to Guelph again soon because I read his book. And as a camper and a canoeer myself, I couldn't put the book down. And why I'm telling you this story is there's a part of Adam that he would probably agree with, even though he's not here to defend himself. There's a part of the book that say he's just sheer crazy for what he did. But he taught me something. He had a dream about 2 years ago, 3-4 years ago maybe. He wanted to travel, as he did, from north above the Yukon, Whitehorse, Mackenzie River, and it was more like 4 months of traveling all the way above Yellowknife, all the way to Hudson Bay, to Baker Lake. And he started in May when the ice had come out, and he ended his trek in September. And this book tells you a story of a young man who took some time off from his PhD work to make this trek. And as he says in his acknowledgments, he could never have done it without a modest GoFundMe page. He barely raised $5,000. I think he needed $30,000. But a generous donor came out of the woodwork from the Canadian Geographic. And Adam tells a remarkable story, I think of incredible courage and craziness, as he paddled up against the waters, across the Mackenzie and across this great north of Canada. He actually quotes and says it so incredibly. There's 3 million lakes in the northern part of Canada. 1,000 lifetimes wouldn't be enough to paddle them all. But it's unbelievable how he makes this journey. And he does ask a few friends before he goes, but most of them either have kids at their age or they've said to Adam, I don't want to be eaten by a polar bear or a grizzly. And at the end of the day, he has his encounters. He meets the wild muskox. He meets the fox and the wolves and, of course, the grizzlies. But most of all, he met within himself the soul that at times, I'm not sure if I'd say wanted to give up, but there was a moment, I knew why I couldn't do this journey. There was a moment when he was eating his macaroni and pulling up the mesh on his face that he said he couldn't count how many hundreds of black flies he was eating with his macaroni. I knew in that moment I couldn't do it. But this is what he taught me. After 40 days of seeing no people, a plane landed to drop him his food. And that was a costly. And Adam said he landed, young guy about his age in his 20s, and he realized in that instant how he had not missed the news. He had not really missed people that much either. He was intrigued, but it was a very short conversation. And he discovered in that 4-month journey that there is time to be alone and understand the beauty of his creation. And I think he wrote this book, if anything, in hopes that people who read it will realize how important it is to care for God's creation, for this beautiful planet. Finally, in one of his most revealing moments, I knew this guy was dedicated when he zipped up his tent. He says every night he'd kill about 100 black flies inside the tent. Thinking about this wild and woolly John the Baptist. This guy was wild and woolly. And as he zipped it up, he heard a voice outside, and it was a young woman. And I thought, my God, I'm an extrovert. I'd be out of that tent. I haven't seen anybody in 40 days. I'm out of that tent in a second. He said he talked through the tent, and he said, I've just killed all my black flies. I can't come out. Well, she called 6 other women. They're all from Minnesota. They said, in so many words, you must be crazy. You must be a hermit. As he described how he had left from the Yukon, and at this point he's almost at Hudson Bay. And he revealed to these young women that no, he wasn't crazy. He had actually paddled in Minnesota as he's paddled throughout North America. And I think he revealed to these young women that he had a mission. And his mission was to accomplish what he planned to accomplish, and that was to make the Hudson Bay before the snow fly. And I'll leave for the rest of the story for you to read the book. But he revealed to me somebody that understands that sometimes when you are all alone, you discover the most about yourself. For me, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I am a child of God. I am loved by God. And the incredible belief and truth I feel is that God loves every single child and every single human being in this world. Thanks be to God.